Friday. This week was long. Can't even lie. It just seems like I did my Monday Instagram live like 2 weeks ago. I mean, I did, but the one from this Monday seems so far away. I got a whole bunch of new followers on Twitter last night, so I'm hoping that some of you all have joined me here and you can see how I rock the Instagram flow this way. Good morning, come to me, Demi. So I just posted my graphic for this summer's Mercury retrograde. So if you've been following me for a while, I usually create a graphic where I lay down all of the dates of important events related to this Mercury retrograde, so you can get the big picture time-wise, and so that you can really stay on top of things and have a reference point. The best thing about astrology is that, like, you can use it to predict stuff, but also to give you like time frames. Like, you know, June is over on the 30th, right? So you can know that a particular transit is going to end on a particular date, and the events that are correlated to and connected to the symbolism of that event has a finite timeline. Glory be to the stars for that. So this Mercury retrograde is a bit different. Different. Usually I would mark the beginning of a Mercury retrograde with the date that Mercury crossed over into its retrograde shadow. So quick primer for those who don't really understand Mercury retrograde, or think you do but you really don't. Mercury goes retrograde 3 or 4 times a year. Nothing out of the normal, nothing out of the ordinary. But a lot of times when Mercury goes retrograde, it will repeat a aspect with a particular planet. So the Mercury retrograde is when Mercury is going to revisit a specific portion of the zodiac, and the symbolism of the sign, right, that Mercury visits during that time is important and relevant. But also this using Mercury's kind of important events around the retrograde as a marker of time. So how it usually goes is Mercury's going to travel through a certain portion of the zodiac 3 times, and you start counting the beginning of that retrograde cycle the day that Mercury crosses over the degree where it will come back to, right, later. So Mercury's going to travel forward, pause, go back, and pause at that first point again. And we call that portion of the zodiac and the time period around that the retrograde shadow. So shadow just meaning that Mercury is going over this a few times. So we take the symbolism of the sign or signs, and we mark time and interpret time by when Mercury is doing these things in this sign. This time, however, we are marking the beginning of the summer's Mercury retrograde, not by the moment that that Mercury crosses over the degree of where it will station direct later this summer. We are actually beginning to count this Mercury retrograde as in full effect June 18th. June 18th, and really the days leading up to it, Mercury is going to conjoin Mars for the first of 3 times. So if you remember the retrograde from November, December of 2018, you will know that Mercury conjoined Jupiter in Scorpio 3 times. If you recall the Mercury retrograde of the summer of 2018, you will know that Mercury squared Jupiter 3 times. And if you recall the Mercury retrograde from the end of 2017, beginning of 2018, you will know that Mercury conjoined Saturn 3 times. This time, Mercury is going to conjoin Mars 3 times. And Mercury is one fickle bitch, I tell you. Mercury, the nature of that planet is such that it takes on the qualities of that which it touches, the sign it's in. Mercury is, if you think about the actual metal Mercury, it's reflective. It used to be made into mirrors, the backing on mirrors. So this reflective quality of Mercury is one in which, as a messenger, Mercury is just reflecting, right? It's just a container. It's a vessel. It's a medium. And so in this sense, Mercury is not about judging things, right? So judgment is putting a value on something, either monetarily or ethically or morally. Mercury's not about that judgment life. Mercury is like, oh, everybody here's dancing the cha-cha, dance the cha-cha, right? Oh, everybody's here talking about such and such, I'm gonna talk about such and such too, even if I don't even know what the fuck y'all talking about. No shade to Geminis, no shade to Virgo, but you have to like be real about like these planets and signs, in that like, okay, so one of my followers, and I would like to call her slightly a friend because she's so supportive of my work, but she's on here right now, and this person's chart is so mercurial. She literally is an interpreter and translator, right? Like that's what Mercury does, right? So when we see Mercury making multiple aspects with the same planet over the course of a particular cycle, in this case the Mercury retrograde, understand that Mercury's primary job is as an interpreter and a translator. And depending on the sign, it may be more on the interpretation side or more the translating side. And I explained this to a client the other day this way. Translating means you take one idea, one image, one concept, one word, and as it exists in one medium or language, you take it, pluck it out, and just drop it in the container of another system or language. So a lot of times it means taking things literally, right? I remember in high school when I was learning French, we would learn all of these French idioms, and when you translated them, the idioms did not make any sense, right? I don't even remember. There was one about a cat. I don't know, like le chat mange le banane. I don't know, right? But let's just say that was a French. Good morning, Veronica. But let's just say that that was the idiom, right? Le chat mange banane, right? The cat eats banana or something like that, right? Now, it doesn't literally mean that a cat eats banana, right? That idiom has some specific cultural reference and context. But in translation, you literally just translate the words, right? That's one of Mercury's functions. But the other function is interpretation. And interpretation is different because interpretation takes into consideration the implication. It takes into consideration the intention, and it is aware of the cultural framework from which a particular word or sentence or idea or concept comes from, right? So whenever we're talking about Mercury doing anything, especially retrograde, we're really talking about this idea of interpretation and translation, right? Your email program, Gmail, is a translator. It takes your words, mangles them up into some kind of code, sends them through the wires and the ether of the internet, and then it lands in someone else's inbox back into the words that you have written, right? So in this case, your email software is just a translator. It's taking something from one medium to another, preserving the existing words and language, right? Gmail does not interpret your email unless you tell it to translate. And right, like when you press that translate function, right? That translate function is just telling you what the words mean. It's not telling you what the sentence means, unless of course the algorithm and artificial intelligence has been trained properly, right? So when we're talking about this upcoming Mercury retrograde and it's conjoining Mars 3 times, and Mercury don't really have no real like I mean, the whole function of Mercury is to like be a mirror of its surroundings, to repeat, translate, right? So if Mercury's on Mars, then this Mercury retrograde really becomes about Mars. And I gave a list of keywords here, and let me see if I can find them, and then I can read them to you. Y'all know I be driving and doing them both, but just work with me. I'm gonna see if I can find all of these keywords that I just typed up last night, and I can read them to you. Hold on, almost got it. Okay, all right. So these are my Mars keywords that are relevant to this particular Mercury retrograde. Take notes or just go to thepeoplesoracle.com and it's there for your reference point forever and always until the internet dies. Okay, separation, conflict, violence, combativeness, defensiveness, courage, aggressiveness, assertiveness, agency, self-preservation, and strength of will. So the key to Mars is because I can, right? Like purely having the capability to do something is the motivation for doing something. And so this is why my word for this particular Mercury retrograde is disengage. All right. Now, what I said in this blog post, and this is one of those things that I'm going to tell y'all, and I'm going to repeat to y'all probably like 5 times. Or 20. And then when the shit hits the fan, y'all gonna be like, Dana told me. She tried to tell us that the word for this Mercury retrograde is disengage. Why? Do not pull out your big guns unless you plan to use them. Why? Because words mean things. And once those words escape your lips or your fingertips, you can't get them back, and you cannot control where they travel to after that, and you can't even control the way that anybody else interprets them. So don't say it unless you mean it. All right? And even then, consider if you really want to say it. Now, other times, this might mean speak up. Use your words. Use your words. Now, this is important because the first part of this Mercury retrograde begins in Cancer. And I kind of shook up a lot of folks last night on Twitter, but you know, I just do my job, right? And my job is to just let y'all know what's going on. Don't shoot the messenger, right? So I shook up a lot of people because basically what's about to happen. Oh, Lord help us. So last July, we had like this Mars retrograde in Capricorn. And Mars retrograded back to like 10 degrees Capricorn. And bam, here comes a full moon lunar eclipse at 10 degrees Capricorn. Right? At a lunar eclipse, it's a full moon, which means the sun would have been at 10 degrees Cancer and the moon and Mars would have been at 10 degrees Capricorn. Like, that's really cute, great, nice, great, whatever. So on July, I think it's July 7th, Mercury is going to station retrograde conjunct Mars at 10 degrees Cancer. I wish I could make stuff up. Like, I wish I was as creative as some of these other writers are, but I only tell like what's really, really going on, and I didn't pick it. It's not my fault. So, right, if we go back to July of 2018, we don't have the Capricorn this time, right? So, if you weren't following me then, a lot of what we were dealing with last year was this around this idea of regulating the process and the outcome, regulating resources, right? Wanting to like really make progress and reach a new consensus in a particular area of our lives but also having to reckon with like real limitations and being sober and soberly assessing the resources that are available to us, like not deluding ourselves about what something really is, but also remembering that even though, you know, there may be a quote, you said Control Alt Delete me from Earth that day, right? So even though there may be like this really concrete reality or set of limitations that we're dealing with, last year was really about the tension between principle, right? The principles that you stand on, the consensus, and being practical. And that when you are principled, a lot of times you can really figure out how to make things work even though it looks like it can't. So last year we really were trying to figure out how to make things work while we were still being principled. And it was really, really, really hard because Capricorn is like, yo, you don't get nothing that you don't earn and you don't deserve, right? So that was 2018. So we don't have that Capricorn energy. Last summer, when we were having this Cancer Capricorn thing, so Cancer's always the moon, always mom, always women, always family. I believe like the moms that were in detention with their children or separated from their children at the border due to racist and violent policies by Trump, I believe that they like had a sit-in or some kind of like hunger strike, right, around the separation. But this was literally during like this Cancer, you know, Capricorn, Libra thing last year. So this year we're just left with the Cancer. We don't have the Capricorn. So already, right, we have a precedent established for the narrative collectively that's happening around Cancer and Capricorn, right? That was also the tariffs. Again, this idea of regulating resources, regulating the process and the outcome. We had these tariffs come up around the same time with that Mars retrograde, right? So now we don't have the Capricorn. We don't have the regulation. What we do have though is a Mercury retrograde that begins at the same degree of that eclipse last summer, right? July 27th, 2018. And this time we're dealing with Cancer. So throw out all you think about Cancer, about being moody and all of this stuff. Cancer is literally about the immediate needs of the body and how the environment responds to your immediate needs, right? So when I talk about, and I'm gonna do this quick, when I talk about water signs, right, all the time, I'm talking about biology, I'm talking about physiology, I'm talking about the body, I'm talking about blood ties. Cancer is the body at face value, meaning what are the internal mechanisms that communicate to our brains that we are hungry, sleepy, in pain, right? Whatever these needs that our body has, and then how responsive to our bodies is our environment. So in an ideal situation, right, when we're babies, mommy, right, again, here we go with the moon in Cancer, mommy is responsive to our needs, and that our presence in our home, our presence in our family and community changes and responds to our presence, right? Like that's the ideal situation around the moon. Except for most of us don't have the moon in Cancer. So many of us, for example, people who have moon in Aries or Scorpio, definitely the environment did not change for you. Matter of fact, like in order to survive, you had to figure out, right? If you got moon in Capricorn, moon in Scorpio, right? You had to figure out how to get your needs met from what was available, right? So anytime we have this significant stuff happening in Cancer, like we have this retrograde, this Mercury-Mars conjunction, what we're really talking about is the responsiveness of our environments to our immediate needs. And I always ask the question, like, you know, part of what parenting does is it reinforces or disrupts our connection with our own body, right? So you can even look at the moon in your own natal chart and say, how responsive am I to my body speaking to me? And is there something that supersedes my capacity to be responsive to my own needs? If so, what kinds of experiences did I have from my primary caregivers and in my upbringing that might have superseded or disrupted my capacity to listen to my body and interpret what it's saying to me? For example, if you have moon in Aries, more than not, you were moving around frequently. So there really isn't this sense of belonging in a place sense, right? That there's constant disruption and separation and change, and that home becomes, right, your familiar becomes movement, your familiar becomes disruption. And so as an adult, you know, you're dealing with society's pressures that you put down roots, make a home, find a community of family and belong, but like your imprint for family and your imprint for home and belonging is, nope, I got to get up and move. I mean, I've seen this so many times in the charts of clients, right? So when we have this Mercury retrograde, the majority of it is in Cancer. We're really having conversations with and about mom. We're having conversations about home, about family, about belonging. And these are really sensitive topics for a lot of people. Many people are estranged from their family. Many people live physically distant from their family, and there's not a tight connection there. And so when we have these transits through Cancer that come up, right, it's reinforcing and allowing us an opportunity to visit our own birth chart's narrative around the moon and the house in our birth chart that has Cancer. If you have my monthly horoscope workbook, or if you have my 2019 sidereal astrology guide, you can really figure out how this is functioning for you in a really personal manner. One last thing I want to say, I talked about Cancer. Oh, two last things I want to say. Second thing is that basically this Mercury retrograde begins with a conjunction between Mercury and Mars on June 18th at 29 degrees Gemini. That might sound familiar because there's actually an eclipse with the sun at 29 Gemini and moon at 29 Sagittarius on July the 16th. So I'm always talking about following the narrative and triggers, and how, like, when we have the same signs or degrees of signs being visited by different astrological configurations, we know that this is a really important story that, like, our summer or our year is centered around. So these late degrees of Gemini and Sagittarius are really important because last summer the eclipses in Gemini and Sagittarius began at like 28 degrees of Gemini and Sagittarius. So basically, whether or not you have something between 26 and 29 Gemini, 26 and Gemini, or Sagittarius rather, this whole idea of words meaning things and making our lives and our world a living testimony of our intentions and convictions, and then the Cancer narrative of belonging, home, family, mother, our physical bodies and immediate needs, right? A larger sense of belonging. All of this is colored by Mars now. And Mars really is like, Mars is like that friend, like you beefing with somebody, right? And like they just ready to scrap all the time. Yo, we could get in the car right now and we could go and we could, right? And then you always have to calm your hype friend down. Like your hype friend is always ready to like blow up their inbox or like, you know, tag them on social media in something. Like Mars is always about that life. So I'm gonna go through real quick here these three conjunctions of Mercury and Mars, but really just focus on like what Mars is doing. So the first one is in Gemini. Mars has been in Gemini for a while now. It'll leave next weekend. Gemini often means two of something, right? So wherever you have Gemini in your birth chart, that house topics can mean two of something: two spouses, two jobs, two source of income, two different, distinctly different careers that run concurrently or one after the other. It can mean two children, like twins, 2 degrees or more degrees, right? So Gemini is often going to mean two or more of something. For example, as if your 7th house, you could be dealing with two different professionals or two, you know, love interest, or two conflicts or two litigations, right? Or whatever it may be, or a multiplicity of people you're encountering one-on-one. But either way, Mars in Gemini is so confused because Mars and Mercury don't really have anything in common. So when Mars is in Gemini, to the drive to act in your own best interest and to preserve your body, to take action, that is commiserate with your capabilities is subservient to Mercury. So your actions are articulating, translating, or interpreting something, right? Your actions might be using your hands or multitasking or doing more than one thing at once. But Mars and Gemini can be kind of confusing because both energies are kind of frantic, right? So just trying to make sense of things happening really fast and things changing. One of the things that I've personally experienced with this Mars in Gemini that I think kind of reaches a culmination with the conjunction next week is that people say a lot of stuff. People just be talking. And the way I function is like I'm always listening very intently to see what people are saying and what they mean, right? But people just say stuff like, and it's not, no judgment here. They really just be talking. Like, they don't pay attention to what they say. They don't listen to themselves. They don't think before they speak. Like, it's just like, so with Gemini, it's kind of like, you really like don't want to be taking people that seriously, but then Saturn's in Sagittarius. And it's like, oh, but you have to. Yo, next week, I'm going to show y'all that chart for when Mercury conjoins Mars. Basically, what happens is Mars is going to oppose, like all within like 2 or 3 days, Mars oppose Saturn, Mercury conjoins Mars, and the moon is in, what's today? Right, so the moon is in Sagittarius. Right, it's about to be lit next week. So that's that one conjunction. To me, that Mercury-Mars conjunction is like explosive revelations of news and information, like an overwhelming amount of news and information happening that you're trying to contextualize it. And once one piece of information comes out, like you're trying to make sense of it, but before you do, you get another piece of information or another phone call or another conversation, or you're trying to properly contextualize an inordinate amount of information, which we could see how that could happen, right? And just because of like how I'm always talking about once the moon enters a mutable sign, it's about to be lit. The moon is going to be on a mutable sign on June 18th. So the news is going to be, right? Let's see. Then the next one is in Cancer at the retrograde. So I already talked about that. You know, if you've been needing to have a conversation in your Cancer house, that Mercury stationary retrograde can make sure you have that. But again, disengage, words mean things. Right, so the second one is more about, I think, immigration policies at the borders and what's happening in those detention centers, and, you know, possibly something really dramatic or drastic. I don't even know how it could be more so than it is, but that's kind of my like collective ongoing theme around the sign Cancer, because that's the precedent that was set last summer with the detaining of immigrants, and also abortion, right? Abortion rights and bodily autonomy of women is another thing that could really be significant during that Cancer portion of the Mercury retrograde, especially the Mercury-Mars conjunction, which is on July 7th. And then the last one is September 3rd in Leo. Now, y'all know I be throwing so much information, but if you just write down the dates and don't think too much about astrology, you could go back and look at your journals and your emails and conversations that you were having at that time to contextualize what that event correlated for you personally. So for this Mercury-Mars conjunction in Leo, I'm actually going back. I'm sorry, I have to. I'm going back to the beginning of September. Actually, all of September of 2017. If I'm not mistaken, there were actually 3 conjunctions of Mercury and Mars then. And similarly to this one one of the stations during that Mercury retrograde was conjunct Mars. So like the first few days of September 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th of 2017, Mercury and Mars were conjoined at like 4 degrees Leo, which happened to be where an eclipse had just occurred. And there were a lot of wildfires, there were a lot of hurricanes and storms and damage. I mean, Hurricane Maria, was Harvey then? Yeah. But Saturn was in Scorpio, so that was a whole kind of different beast going on there. So we have our 3rd conjunction, though, in Leo, and that, for me, is like my most recent astrological memory around Mercury-Mars conjunction, because Mars only transits a particular sign like once every 18 to 24 months. So we would not have even seen Mars in Leo since that time. Since September of 2017. I believe Mars entered Leo like on August 26th or 27th or something like that of 2017. So this is the Mars return of the Nazi torches and hurricanes Maria and Harvey, the wildfires in California, even the Las Vegas massacre. Even that astrological event was Mars and Leo. Matter of fact, the day that massacre occurred, the moon entered Aquarius and like triggered that Mars and Leo, Saturn in Scorpio, Venus and Mars and Leo stuff. So really, that's our most recent memory of Mars and Leo. And unfortunately, that conjunction is actually occurring like exactly 24 months to the day of when it occurred in 2017, right? September 3rd of 2019, Mercury and Mars are conjoining. So all of that to say, this is all happening, right? These 3 conjunctions with Mars and Mercury retrograde, this is all happening in the middle of eclipse season, when we have an eclipse in Gemini, and then we have an eclipse in Sagittarius. I feel like I need to do like a summer astrology primer or something, because even though I've written like the 2019 sidereal astrology guide, I've written the 2019 eclipse guide, I just feel like so much has happened this year, and it's only June. And we haven't even gotten to the eclipse. Like the eclipses haven't even happened yet. And like all of this stuff is going on. I mean, we haven't even talked about the ongoing college board scandal. And we haven't talked about the tax returns and the subpoenas, right? All of this is Gemini. All of this is knowledge and information. All of this is, I need a copy of this, you know, I need to file this, right? All of this is Gemini. Give me the information. So much is happening around control of information, control of what you know, control of what I said, watching my words. They know that words mean things. That is why they're trying to keep the tax returns from coming. They know that words mean things. That's why they don't want you to have a transcript. That's why they don't want to sit down and speak under oath, because words mean things. Yes, this summer is going to be so intense, and like I'm really trying to wrap my mind around the big picture of it. So give me like a week or two to really sit and think about this. I know the Mercury retrograde is important. I know the eclipses are important, but we also have these stelliums happening. We have a stellium in Cancer from July into August. We have a stellium in Leo from August into September. We have a stellium in Virgo from September into October, right? So those 3 houses in your chart are getting the business. That Virgo one is important because that's phase 3 of mutable madness. So I feel like I need to like create a graphic or like a hierarchy of priorities or timeline, something that like can help us track these narratives. I don't even know. I kind of just want to do it for myself because my situation is getting blown up. So anyways, so go read that, go read my blog post on Mercury retrograde. Save the graphic, you'll need it later. For now, The next 2 weeks are about to be intense, y'all. And you know I never say things like that lightly. When I say that some shit is about to go down, I am right 100% of the time. So I've looked at my calendar for the next 2 weeks, and some shit is about to go down. Again, before we even get to the actual eclipses. Before the eclipses even happen. So I'll be back. I'm doing a lot of readings right now with a lot of clients, trying to give everybody their 2019 eclipse reading. So I do want to do some more of those. I might be booking for July. I don't know. I have so much that I want to do. Yeah, you guys are expressing my personal sentiment. Like, I'm legit tired. The sun hasn't even entered Gemini yet. Like, y'all, like, listen, I would like to take a nap instead. I would actually prefer to nap like until 2020. But then that's a whole other thing we have to deal with. As always, I'll put this video up on YouTube so that if you don't get to watch the whole thing before it expires. And there was one more thing I wanted to say to you. Yeah, I can't remember what I wanted to say. Oh yeah, I have a lot of videos up on YouTube already really explaining like what's going on right now. If you want a big picture overview of this year, go to my YouTube channel and there's a video called Mutable Madness 2019. Or if you just search Mutable Madness 2019 on YouTube, I've tagged many of my videos so that gives you a really great big picture overview. Other than that, I need to like sit down and digest this summer because we'll get through together. We'll get through together. Yes, we'll get through together. Yeah, y'all ain't really trying to go to 2021 either, because in 2021, February, like every single planet in the sky will be in Capricorn. So if you liked 2018, if 2018 was your jam, if that was your mood, and I say that in jest because I know for most of y'all it wasn't. 2020 and 2021 brings your Capricorn house to the next phase of the journey. It's never a repeat, although sometimes it is, I'm not gonna lie. But if it's a repeat, it's because you have something to resolve. So, yeah. But also, like, stories aren't just over, like, they continue. So that's just the way that it is. Like, you have a second house, for example, if you're Sagittarius rising, and it's Capricorn, and you never stop needing money, right? Hopefully you have some. So the transits to your second house are like, have some money, or spend some, or where you gonna get it from, or they took it all, right? That kind of thing. So yeah, happy Friday, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.